What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Big time episode today with a great guest. We're going to talk about, can the Badgers land Amari Stewart? Do they have a puncher's chance at one of the elite receivers in the 2024 class? We're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I am your host, Ryan Herrings. As always, really appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Let's bring Brian Smith on. He is Locked On's recruiting insider. Brian, as always, thank you for jumping on the show, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a good time to talk some Big Ten football with the Badgers.
Let's do it. So I want to start here. We have a huge, Wisconsin has a huge official visit weekend coming up June 2nd. I've started to preview it. I wanted to pick out some of the key names and ask you, pick your brain a little bit. I want to start with I'Marion Stewart, the 6'1", listed 6'1", 175-pound receiver out of Chicago, Illinois. Wisconsin's been going into Illinois hard the last cycle and a half. This is a prospect with a Georgia offer, Michigan, big-time offer list, lots of talent. What did you see? Let's get into his recruitment in a second, but let's start with his film. What did you see when you put the film of Stewart on?
He's what Wisconsin has lacked for the entire lifespan of me being on this planet, and that is sheer speed outside the numbers. They just don't get enough kids like him. They've had a few, don't get me wrong, but you need one of these pretty much in every recruiting class, and Wisconsin doesn't normally do that. This is a kid that can come in and compete for playing time in year one with the Badgers. His film doesn't lie. He's playing against Chicago kids, so it's not like they're a bunch of slow guys, and he's going right by them. Whether it's a deep post, whether it's a slant, whether it's a screen, making a guy miss, he can score because he is better than the guy in front of him. Wisconsin needs more of that, because I want you to think back, how many times has Wisconsin, since you've watched the Badgers, gets the ball with a minute 20 to go in the half? It's harder for them to run a 2-minute offense because they don't have burners. You need somebody every now and then that can just make guys miss and run past people. It's really not a lot about coaching. 4-minute offense, Wisconsin's, you can make the argument, it's the best team in the country all day long when they can run play action and run the ball, etc. They need to take that next step. Guys like Stewart, and he can flat out go. By the way, Georgia recently offered. They have a lot of guys like this. So that tells me he's a dude. Georgia can be as picky as any school in the country at any position, and the Dogs want him.
And that, I wanted to go there for a second. So when fans see offers come out, obviously not every offer is created equally, right? Players will sometimes report offers. Sometimes offers are kind of tentative. It's here, but it's not really here. Georgia and Michigan actually really want this kid. And to me, those are data points that, forget the star ranking, forget everything else. Like when those type of schools really want a dude, like to your point, that's somebody that makes you kind of sit up and say, okay, we got to take this guy seriously.
Georgia is the best program in the country. It's not because they sign talent. It's because they sign and develop talent. They've done a tremendous job of it. You just got to tip your cap. Michigan, they've had some pretty darn good recruiting classes, but they still coached up some 3-star kids that are now in the league, receiver included. Some of these guys, I'm like, who was this? Guys scoring touchdowns last year against Ohio State. Ask the DBs for the Buckeyes. They got smoked. They figured it out. Their receiver coach does a good job. I evaluate kids, and I have my own opinions, but when staffs that get paid and win with those kind of players want the kid, that's the best evaluation there is. So it's a legit situation, and I think it was 247. I could be wrong, but they had him like the number 304 player in the country. While it's hard to make rankings work, I have a hard time seeing him outside the top 200, and that's being very conservative. His speed says SEC. His speed says like where I live in Florida, he would fit right in. This is a kid that's going to make an impact somewhere.
And one of the things, just watching his film, I want to get your take on this. It feels like when you watch Stewart's film, he can win in a lot of different ways. Some receivers, they come onto campus and you're like, I think that's a slot guy or a boundary guy, or that's just a possession guy. Stewart, you feel like he can run verticals, posts, but he has great hands, good after the catch ability. Feels like you could move him around a lot. And I want to tie that into Phil Longo, who has developed receivers and developed passing offenses. It feels like a great fit for that type of scheme.
They're going to move him around because you're going to use him with jet sweeps. You could put him in the backfield and put a poor linebacker in a one. If you're playing man against Wisconsin, used to be, it wasn't that big a deal. But you start having guys that can catch the ball outside, that can move around, play different spots, slot as well, put him at running back on 3rd and 6, get a linebacker on him. You make the quarterback's life so much easier. You're darn right they're going to move him around. He can play flanker, he can play slot, and I would use him in the backfield some. You might even see him in Wildcat. He's just an athlete that's going to make the first guy miss more often than not.
And then let's go to this recruitment now. So we've talked a lot about the game. Badger fans are getting excited. The hype is building. This guy's a stud. Do the Badgers have a puncher's chance here to land I'Marion Stewart, who, as we talked about, is one of the higher profile 2024 receivers if you just look at the offer list?
I say yes for a number of reasons. Number one is playing time. Again, no offense to what's in Wisconsin's receiver board, but it's not the same as Georgia or Michigan. He's going to play earlier if he goes there. I don't need to call up Luke Fickell and ask him if they're selling that to this kid. That's common sense. He's got a chance to come in and play. How far is Chicago from Madison? What is it, 2 hours? Something like that. It's not a really big deal. It's away from mom and that, but you can go home for the weekend too. It's the nice, happy medium. Those are reasons that Wisconsin has always recruited the city of Chicago in any sport. It could be women's volleyball. It doesn't matter. They can recruit there, and it's pretty easy. I think that, and then the final point, if I remember correctly, he's visiting the very first weekend. Yes? Mm-hmm. June 2nd?
June 2nd.
Historically, you want either the first or the last visit. And depending on the staff, depending on the player, it's different for each guy. But Wisconsin, I think, is better to get him on campus early because some kids are just completely, and I do mean completely, taken away when they go visit Georgia, like with their weight room and their facility. They got the best facilities. You want to get him on campus so at least you get in the park with what's going on and get your puncher's chance there, because Georgia's going to visit, Michigan's got their history, et cetera. When he visits those other schools, he'll at least have something already to compare. And then you try to get him back on campus, regardless if he commits to your school or somewhere else later, and he has something to draw on, and he's been to campus once before, but it's just volume. You cannot have him on campus enough. Again, he's only a couple hours away. That's plausible. So I think it's probably better than a puncher's chance. It's going to come down to comfort and distance from home, which that's only going to be answered by Stewart himself.
You hit on something that's really interesting. Fans, and I almost want to do a whole show of this someday, of just things that fans overrate or underrate in recruiting. But one of the things you just hit on, fans always say, I want the last visit. You said something that's really interesting that we don't hear a lot, the first or the last visit. So, yeah,
it depends on who you are. Like, historically, recruiting used to be later. Late November, the first 2 weeks of December, in the 80s and 90s is when everybody brought it. I mean, like, there would be recruiting weekends for schools that were 25 plus kids. It's not that way anymore. It's more like 4 to 12. And they just balance it out through the month of June. It's completely changed. But everybody has them over a period of time. It's not as big a deal. But some schools didn't want you visiting their rival the next weekend. They would do everything they could to get you to come that first weekend with them and to commit, not take the visit. So it depends on how good of closer your head coach is. It depends on how close you think you are to get him to commit. And in this case, I think it's just good to get him on campus, say, hey, you're a Midwest kid. You can be different here. You can change our roster. Maybe he doesn't even take the UGA visit. Don't kid yourself. They don't want him taking that visit. They may tell him, I'm not stupid. Nobody wants a recruit thereafter to go to visit UGA, period. It's the hardest school to recruit against right now. But that's what the Badgers are doing. I don't think it's a bad thing that he's coming on campus. It wouldn't shock me if he committed. It wouldn't shock me if he didn't. But they're going to get their swing right out the gate.
I love it. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about a speedster running back and a big-time edge prospect, also both coming June 2nd. Keep Ryan Smith on the line and talk about those players coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our great friends over at Bird Dogs. I've talked about Bird Dogs a lot, right? I wear them. They sent us some swag. They are incredible. They keep me from, honestly, this is a true story. I told y'all, if you're an everydayer, you've heard this. I got confused as a homeless person. Some lady came up and told me my life was going to get better. It's because I like wearing really comfortable stuff, but sometimes the comfortable stuff doesn't look great, right? So Bird Dogs solves my problem of not looking homeless. I can still have my comfort, but it's versatile. It makes me look great. And it keeps people from, kind of throwing dollars at me on the side of the street. So an incredible pants, shorts, whatever you want, the sizing that you can custom fit it. They have great pockets, the versatility. It makes you look absolutely incredible. My wife likes them because, again, I don't look homeless, but I like them because I get my comfort and my versatility. I can go out and not have to worry about putting on clothes that don't feel great just to look good. So Bird Dogs has solved that random problem that is in my life. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter the promo code lockedoncollege, they'll throw in a free Yeti style tumbler. As a free Yeti style tumbler with every order. I want to say thank you again for everybody tuning into Locked On Badgers. We're going to get Brian Smith back on. And again, with the great guests, we run out of time before we run out of questions. But that's why we keep having you on, Brian. So we keep learning more and more about these players.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. It's fun. Recruiting right now, man, this is my time of year. May and through the early part of July, it's the busiest part of the year.
Well, let's talk about a couple more players quick. Also coming up on June 2nd for that huge official visit weekend for the Badgers. I want to start with Darrion Dupree. He's somebody I've talked about, but I haven't gotten your opinion on. The high 3-star running back out of Chicago, Illinois, 5'10", 190 pounds. Somebody that Notre Dame's been after, Illinois has been after, Wisconsin is after. What was your take on Darrion Dupree putting the film on?
Surprised me. Chicago, I don't know what it is. They haven't had a ton of elite running backs. You would think for a city that size, they would. My guess is because basketball is such a big deal there. Most of the athletes want to play hoops, but he's one of the better running backs I've seen come out of the area in a while. And I think he can play in any offense. I'm comfortable in saying that he could compete at Georgia. He could compete at A&M. He could compete at USC. It doesn't matter. He can compete in anybody's running back room. He will make you miss. He has very good vision. And he will pack a punch. He's a kid, probably I'd say top out 205 to 210, but he's a traditional running back, and I think he would fit in very well with what Wisconsin's done traditionally. Curious to see what their offense is going to be moving forward, but he catches the ball well too. So all-around running back with power, yeah, those are always good.
Where do you see his recruitment going? Is he a guy you think is going to take some time or take other visits, or do you think he's a guy who might want to shut it down a little early?
That's a great question. Wisconsin, I look at it from two perspectives. It's got to be attractive, right? I mean, the history of the running backs in the last 30 years, it's as good as it gets. You know, guys going to the Heisman ceremony, guys winning, guys getting drafted, et cetera, et cetera. But they've changed offenses, they've changed coaches. So I'm not sure how he's evaluating Wisconsin. And I could probably say that about a lot of recruits, but they've been the one that's the most trendy pick for Dupree for quite some time. So maybe he shuts it down. I don't know if he's waiting on some specific offer. I haven't heard. I want to see what he does by the end of the month. If he takes more than 2 visits beyond Wisconsin, I would be concerned. That's how I would look at it from a Badgers perspective. But he might just be a kid that wants to play it out too and just kind of see how Wisconsin's offense operates this fall. Can't really blame him for that. It's a new coordinator. It's a new system, although the coordinator is obviously very, very successful. So it's a little bit of both. 6 one way, a half dozen the other. I like Wisconsin's odds in the end, regardless, but it helps your class if Dupree commits earlier. Again, like a certain receiver, then he's helping you recruit. You know what I mean? Timing matters. It matters. Like coaches always want the quarterback as early as possible, in particular, because they're the forefront of your class, whether you want them to be or not. So it would also help to get a big-time running back from Chicago to commit. Dupree could be that guy for the Badgers.
And I wanted to talk about Longo a little bit because we've talked a lot about Fickell and what he did in the transfer portal, what he did by bringing these coaches in, but specifically because we're about to get into an edge defender and offensive tackle. So I want to take a quick break and just we talked about a receiver and a running back. How important is Phil Longo in landing these skill position recruits now?
I don't think it's very difficult. I can summarize this in 10 seconds. If you're not smart enough to understand that his offense is exciting and fun to play in and can put kids in the NFL, I'm not sure you should go to the University of Wisconsin or wherever Phil might be coaching. That's
really well said. I love it. All right, let's transition to the defensive side. The Badgers have been in on Anelu Lafaele. Gosh, I always mispronounce that last name.
It's hard. I struggle too. I'm not even going to try.
But they've been in on him for a long time. The previous staff identified him. That Jim Leonard, Bobby April defensive staff identified him. This current staff said, yes, we still want you. The offer is good. Come to Madison. What did you see when you put his film on? Because I think he has an interesting an interesting skill set in terms of, is he an outside linebacker? Is he a defensive end in a 4-3? Where do you see him fitting? Because it's not a huge frame, but the athleticism pops off the film.
The defense that they've run at Cincinnati is hard for edge guys because they will move a guy that puts his hand in the dirt on 3rd and 7. They'll go to a 3-3-5 look on a 1st and 10 on the next series, and he'll be a linebacker. I mean, that's not easy. So if you're going to do those kinds of things at Wisconsin and do multiple, most teams run multiple now because offenses are so good. You're just looking to confuse the quarterback and get a freebie and get a pick. You're going to make the defenses are getting a lot more complex, even though they probably don't want to, because you're just not going to win by man. Even like LSU's just not going to man up and just take it's just too hard now. They need guys that can do that. So in a quote unquote undersized edge, he's 6'3" listed. My guess is he's probably 6'2". You always subtract about an inch. Is okay because to your point, he will drop in coverage. He will learn some linebacker, do some different things if they need him to. It depends on which team you're playing. He might just play straight edge most of the time because he's such a good pass rusher. And his film's good, but I think he's versatile enough to move around. And Wisconsin needs more speed on the field defensively to play those teams. Let's just get right to it. The only team that matters are recruiting against is Ohio State. That's it. They just don't compete with them outside the numbers. We know that. Everybody knows that. One way to kind of help is to put the quarterback on his butt. If you're not hitting Ohio State's quarterback, it's going to be a long day because their receivers are better than anybody's. It's just the way it is. You have to be able to naturally rush the passer with 4, meaning you need NFL talent. There is no short. If you got to blitz them, it's man-on-man coverage outside. Yeah, it's not going to end well very often. So kids like this that can do both, maybe confuse the quarterback on one play, and then yet at the same time can bend and come off the edge, man, they're hard to get. Need as many as you can.
Do you find it unusual, just from a national standpoint, that the Badgers have kind of worked their way into East St. Louis, Honolulu High School? We talked about in previous shows, Nick Herbig's that guy, Tretch Kekahuna from last cycle, Kamoy Latu. The Badgers have created a bit of a pipeline there into a spot that would seem unusual for a Midwestern school.
Yes, I would say so, because the first thought is, why would a kid from Hawaii want to go to any Big Ten school? But for whatever reason, a lot of kids from there, they go all over the country now. I mean, like Tua Tagovailoa went to Alabama. I mean, the Hawaiian kids want to get off the island. I've never been there, but I've talked to a few of the kids that are from there and stuff, and some coaches and 7-on-7 tournaments. They kind of want to do different things. You can always go back later in life, maybe once you get, out of college, but they want to try SEC, Big Ten football. Those are the two most prevalent. And I think you're going to see more of it. Wisconsin's had some coaches with connections there. And then, of course, a couple of the kids they got out of there early did well. That helps. So when you get guys from a school and they get drafted, I mean, come on. They're going to see their name, that plaque on the wall when they're walking down. It matters. So I think it's a combination, but Wisconsin's also got to give itself some credit. I mean, they've been to the Rose Bowl a number of times. This isn't just the old Wisconsin, like when I was a little kid in the 1980s that was going like 3-8. They were terrible back then. But once Alvarez took over, they've been good ever since. So now it's cool to go to Wisconsin. So good for them.
Oh, I love it. All right, we're going to take a very quick break, come back with a 4-star offensive tackle also visiting, and get Brian's take on his film and the Badgers' chances in that recruitment. But first, a very quick break for our friends of the show. And also a second to say thank you for tuning in, making us part of your day. Really do appreciate all the everydayers that are here. Let's get Brian Smith back on. And Brian, another, again, kind of a beating the drum here, another player coming for this June 2nd visit. Kevin Haywood, a composite 4-star offensive tackle coming out of Royersville, Pennsylvania. The frame is there, 6'7", 290, offers from Penn State, Auburn, USC, Kentucky. He has official visits on the books for Auburn and USC. What can you tell us when you saw Kevin Haywood and what his film looks like?
He is a combination of the traditional right tackle you would see for the Badgers. I'm going to beat you up and you can't stop me. But he also played pretty well in space. I was surprised because when a kid gets ready to get into his stance, a 3-point stance, you can just tell like they're standing like, this kid is massive. First thing I thought is, this is probably going to be a slow kid. I was wrong. He can move in space. He can get to the second level and get up to the linebackers. And when you're having the length that he does, so that it's going to help you with pass rush, if you can get up there and do combo blocks and stuff, that changes your offense. Because that's, if you get those second level blocks, that's when a guy can take it the distance on a basic power run. He can do it. I don't know if he can play left tackle, but he could definitely play right. And he will absolutely whip your behind because he's just so physical. He fits Wisconsin historically, but I think he's going to be fine as a pass protector, which to Longo's offense is a must. He likes to have a nice balance. This is a kid that would help. My question is, how well are they going to be able to fend off the home state Nittany Lions, who they're recruiting out of their mind right now? That's a really unique battle. It's an in-conference battle. Wisconsin needs to win some of those, even with offensive linemen, if they're going to beat Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. That's, again, it's the same thing. They've got to win more of the 4 or 5-star battles. And this is a chance.
Hey, let me maybe finish on this, but I'm really curious to get your take. Maybe outside of quarterback, or maybe even including quarterback, is offensive line the hardest position to watch film somebody in high school and try to project them to college? Just because the size can be so different, because you don't really know every play what they're supposed to be doing. And it's hard. Sometimes you see a 260-pound guy to try to project 40 pounds of weight on him, or how's a 290-pound guy going to fare in college against other big, strong kids? How hard is it to project those kids out of just watching film?
Insanely difficult. The biggest problem isn't the technique. That's the second one. You were correct about that. Take the kid we're just talking about. He's massive. How many kids are going to line up in front of him at some random public school and be able to take him on? It's just not realistic. He can do every single thing wrong technically and get a pancake.
Right.
And the problem with that, some of these kids that are so big, is they get used to being lazy. Like they don't even pay attention to technique. They don't use their hands to extend or whatever, and they end up crushing the kid. Terrible technique habits. They have to get completely relearned as they redshirt. That's one of the reasons that some of the bigger guys don't always play right away. And it's one of those deals. The other thing is sometimes kids develop late. Joe Alt is an All-American at Notre Dame. He played tight end until like his last year of high school, somewhere up in Minnesota, some random high school in Minnesota. He was like 250, 260. He gained 40 pounds between the time he signed with Notre Dame and he came in. He ended up starting in the middle of his freshman year. You can't project that. It's impossible. Notre Dame had no expectation of him playing early. He started, and now he's going to All-American and possible top 10 pick after 3 years. O-line is really hard to project.
Well, to your point, Joe Staley went to Central Michigan as a tight
end.
Yeah,
they did.
4 years later, he's a first-round pick as a left tackle.
100%. There's no freaking way that any of the schools in the Big Ten would have let him go if they thought he had any chance of doing that. He ended up at a MAC school. I mean, come on. No, right. It's really hard. Some kids develop later. You're just guessing at that point, man. There's nobody's fault. It just is what it is.
No, great stuff as always, Brian. Thank you so much. Make sure everybody at @footballscout_Florida, go follow Brian, see what he's doing on the recruiting front. We try to have him on every week. Brian, as always, I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again, and go Badgers, buddy.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. Really do appreciate it. And we'll talk tomorrow on Wisconsin, and let's go.